Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Welcome to another edition of Whitetail Rendezvous. We're heading out to Iowa, and we're going to meet up with a good friend, Tim Cool, an alumni of Whitetail Rendezvous. And I wanted to catch up with him and ask him a couple questions. Some people have been answering the 10 questions of how to find a place to hunt. We'll do that in the second part. But in the first part, I wanted to see what was up with Prodigy Outdoors, where Tim does some hunting filming. And he's also started a company with CDD Extract. So, Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Bruce. I appreciate our friendship. We've been always communicating on and off throughout the year, so it's good to be back on here with you. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't get out there for turkey hunting. I'm just not a turkey hunter. I have a lot of people, hey, come out for a few days and we'll go shoot some turkeys, and I just haven't done that. I had a guy invite me to Alabama where they can kill, I think, 5 turkeys. And he said, you got to come down here next year because I've never killed a turkey, called in a turkey, done anything with a turkey.
Yeah.
So I am a turkey, that's for sure.
That's okay. I have gone on a lot of hunting trips for turkeys, and it is very fun. But as somebody who likes the big game, I think about it now before I take the trip to go too far, because that money can be well spent on a big game hunt or towards a big game animal type of hunt, whether it's preference points or because even if you go on a 3-day turkey hunting trip 4 or 5 hours away, it's still going to run you $300 to $500 by the time it's all said and done. And now I look at it as, well, I can use that money for preference points or save up for September to go mule deer hunting or whatever. So it's just a kind of a little trick or a tip that I've learned just talking to some other guys that are pretty big game hunters. And they say, hey, if you think about it, it's just a turkey. And not to deter anybody from going on a turkey hunting trip, but it's just something that I think about now before I go too far.
Yeah, there's got to be some good hunting near you. I got a friend up in Castana, and he's always inviting me out there. I'll put you up and everything. It's $500 and kill a turkey. I'm going, man, it's 11 hours just to drive there or to fly there. So I agree exactly what you're saying on the turkey hunt. Let's go back to last fall and let's kind of recap what the heck happened last fall and talk about what's going on in your hunting life.
Last fall was like, I was humbled last season because 2017, I shot a buck really close to home. And last summer, I spent a lot of time scouting various public land and had some nice bucks picked out and got some new private land, which you plan on talking about how to get hunting spots. So that'll be good to add into it. But what had happened was I had a slow October, and then my dad came and went to Missouri to hunt a farm that, again, we have permission to hunt. It's about 4 hours away, and it was public land. And I got set up on this pinch point on a river, and I had a buck come in, and I hit him low, and he ran about 100 yards and turned around and faced the tree after I shot him. And I'm like, well, that's not good. And I'm watching him in the binoculars, and he turned around after a minute or two. And it was all of a minute or two because I had the footage, and he kind of ran off again. And I thought for sure there was no way I didn't put a good shot on him, but it was about a 7-yard shot. And looking back and talking to a lot of people, it's not a shot that anybody really practices. So I had the pin set. If I was shooting straight on the ground, I would have hit him perfectly right through the heart. But that angle, you have to hit him a lot higher than you would ever think. And I'll be honest, I talk to people all the time. I don't post online about hitting a deer bad, but I'll never lie about it. And it was a learning experience for me and the dozens of people that I've talked to about it since then. And the deer, there was good blood, but I never found the deer. And I called a tracker down there, and he described to me what happened, and I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. He goes, let me guess, you had good blood for 100 yards and no deer, no bed, nothing, never to be seen again. And I said, yeah. And he crossed a pretty deep river about waist high waist high on a purse, and went on to some private, and I couldn't get a hold of the landowners and stuff like that. It was a tough pill to swallow. And I came home and I kept at it pretty hard, and the one piece of property I have permission to hunt, another guy has permission to hunt, and he shot one of the big 8s that I was hunting. Another piece I was hunting, another guy next door shot a big 160 class 10 that I was hunting, and before too long, it's almost December. So never finished out the season with a deer buck down, and be honest with you, I'm not a jealous guy. I'm very happy for both those hunters that killed those deer. Every dog has his day, and I know what I had to work on this year, and that was kind of those tougher shots. I guess it could happen to anybody, I guess, and it has happened to a lot of people. You just don't hear about it.
When people aren't going to post on the internet that they missed the deer, they should, but they don't have any pictures, they don't have anything, so they just kind of let it go and move on. I know one of my Pope and Young bull that we later found, I missed him, and I hit him high. I didn't miss him. I hit him high. It was that evening, and so wouldn't you know it, it was 40 yards, good shot, blah, 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 and I just hit him high, and we tracked him, and then it started raining. So I was screwed.
Yeah.
I was just absolutely screwed, and I was really pissed off at myself. Should I waited? He was broadside, 40 yards, very comfortable. And it happens. And I guess talking to enough guys who archery hunt, it does happen. What you have to take away is, okay, did I practice? Did I know the shot was good? Did I do everything I could to put a good shot on it? And if the answer is yes, then you just move on. But it's still a hard pill to swallow, no question about it.
The state of mind that puts you in, it's almost like it's a state of shock. You think it'll never go away and stuff like that. It's crazy, the mindset that happens when you've essentially failed at what you've tried to do and what you wait for all year. And you had to learn to combat that and put that aside and I made a bad shot, but I'm not a bad shooter. You have to kind of do some kind of mantra stuff and get yourself out of that mental state of where to get past hitting a deer bad or whatever, an elk bad. And that is a state of mind that I haven't felt too many times. And it was quite interesting to go through that kind of roller coaster for the next week or two to try to feel comfortable again sitting in the tree stand.
Yeah, I hear you 100% on that. Like I said, people don't post their mistakes or failures. Some people do. In fact, I just had a good session, Dan Infelt, and we talked about exactly that part of the show, because there isn't anything in social media that says, look at me, look at me, look at me. There's nothing to say. And people say, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody that.
Yeah.
That's just human nature, because I think you hit the nail on the head when you said we fail. Yeah, we didn't make the shot. We didn't make the killing shot. Again, you said it was 70 yards out of a tree stand?
7 yards.
7 yards.
7 yards.
Okay.
Yeah, so
folks, I want to clear that up.
Angle.
It was 7 yards, SEVEN, 7.
Yeah, 4 climbing sticks up, approximately 18 to 20 feet, and 5 or 6 or 7 steps from the base of the tree. It's almost a straight down shot. So you actually have to hit them just below the back, about probably 4 inches down from the top of the back, and get down and to catch both lungs. And I kind of went for a heart shot. And at that angle, the arrow was almost going. It just caught it probably just nicked the lung, to be honest with you. I have the footage of the impact. It didn't really enter the chest cavity. It didn't really enter through the chest cavity. It went down along the side of one side of the chest cavity. And when he turned around like that and looked, he was pissed off. And I'll never forget that. It was a foggy night. And when he turned around like that, I was like, that's not good, and stood there and looked at what happened, and there was nothing I could do to get a follow-up shot at that far. So here we are, and I've since moved past it. I know what to work on. I know that for me, it's not a habitual thing. If you play this kind of game long enough, it's going to happen. You can talk to the best, even professional level archers that I've been fortunate enough to meet, and they say the same thing. And for example, when they're on the line shooting in even just a tournament, their livelihood's on the line, and they may shoot a 10 and the guy next to him shoots an X and they lose by 1 point. Probably it's the same feeling. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, a bad shot, or a bad hunter. It's just when you're hunting with a bow, the odds are stacked against you. So you got to take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about, because you rate his rib cage, he thought somehow a ninja buck had hit him in the ribs.
Yeah, I think so.
I almost guarantee it, because he looked back and he's pissed because, okay, who just busted me? And there's no deer there. I don't understand what's going on, because he can't hear you, you can't smell you, you can't see you. And all of a sudden he gets pounded in the ribs, which he has been before. He's been hammered there before. And so he's going, what the heck was that all about? Where is that guy? I'm going to walk over and kick his butt.
And what we can take away from that too, and not necessarily in this exact situation, because I'd never been to this public land piece before. And that's why stand setup is so critical, but not knowing exactly where the deer were going to walk or are going to walk, you may run into that on public land when you do a hang and hunt setup. But that's why it's so critical, stand location, so that you do get that 15, 25-yard shot and they're in front of you and they're quartering away. He kind of came in, and every other deer kind of came in from a different direction. The way I had my stand set up, I'd love to show somebody the tactic and the mental or the technique that I had. But he kind of came in like I wanted him to, but he hugged the edge of the river so close that when he got to the tree was like his crossing point. So he was almost hypothetically underneath the tree, so to speak. So something for me to take away when I go back this year, to move that stand back a little bit and make sure I get that 15, 20-yard shot. That's a better shot angle, because that's really what it came down to, is a shot angle. And obviously I did have my error as well. So
yeah, there's a lot of lessons learned for everybody. And straight down shots, I usually I miss them.
I've never taken one. So I'm an arborist, so I work in a forestry field, an arboriculture field, and the leading cause of accidents is complacency. And there could have been some complacency with that, because it's not a shot I've normally practiced. It's not a shot I've normally taken. Maybe I was a little overconfident, and maybe I should have let him pass. Hindsight 2020. Hey, that is too close. It's not a good shot angle. And anyone that's done it can tell you that it does work, but it does have consequences sometimes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Lessons learned, and that's what this show's about, where you get people saying, hey, this is what happened to me, and figure it out. How sometimes people don't figure out where their shot opportunities are going to be when they set up. No, I don't know if this would have helped you or not, but saying, okay, if he comes basically directly under the tree, what's my angle and where do I have to shoot? Because he's closer than I think he is. And that's true. Yeah, because of the angle. If he's 7 feet, he's only 5 feet. And I wasn't there. And so, but you have to think it before the opportunity comes, because once the opportunity comes, you got to go on muscle memory and put the pins where you want it and let go of the trigger. I mean, the thinking time and the figuring out time is over. I mean, you got to go. Yeah. You got to get in the zone and go for it. That's my 2 cents.
I totally agree.
Now, you're talking about DIY now. How are you locating? And we're going to talk about how to find a place to hunt. But strategically, when you hang and hunt, I call it run and gun, and you call it hang and hunt. How do you decide where to set your stand?
That time of the year during the rut, especially public land or an unknown piece, I'm going to get where I know deer are going to come through, because especially when I go off public land or out of state, I'm not really targeting a specific deer. I'm just targeting whatever animal I deem to be a quality class animal. And in Missouri, I was aiming at a 130 class or better. And this buck was right on the button, probably 135 class deer. And water is one of the best sources for funneling deer through, because river bottoms and stuff like that, where you can get in between two bigger pieces of timber, and you may be sitting there for several hours during the daylight, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, but deer are definitely going to come through there. 100% chance. In that case, it was kind of an open area surrounded by a thick area. And those are nice because you can see a long way. In this case, it was primarily soft maple trees. So I liked that because I was in an area where I could adjust if I needed to adjust my setup. And I did adjust. That was a second tree I hung the stand in, was seeing some deer off in that direction. And I just got a little too close right on top of them. But you have to hunt on a broad scale. There wasn't that much sign in there. There was rubs and stuff, but you have to know what deer are going to do, and deer are going to follow those thin areas. There was big timber around, but this was kind of a thinner area. I like to get far away. I know guys and different people have different theories about hunting close to parking lots, but the access that I had here, this was 9/10 of a mile. I traced it on the OnX, and I walked through an open cornfield to a hedgerow, followed that hedgerow straight down. So basically it was where several things met and the river took a sharp turn. So I had a couple field edges, couple hedgerows kind of meet in there. And it was just really is, it's a spot that I won't tell anybody where it is. Let's put it that way. But the other thing is boat access, private property access to public land. Those are two other things to key in on, is getting a boat, not really a boat because canoe type of thing, a John boat, need like a huge boat, but at least to get to the place. I've got some spots where I have boat access that I don't really plan on bringing the whole deer out. I'll probably quarter them out because it's so remote, but I try to get away from people. I grew up in the eastern part of the country, so I'm used to hearing horns, dogs, leaf blowers, guns, you name it, just constant noise. So I try to find the places where I don't have to hear that. It's kind of why I moved to Iowa, is I don't necessarily enjoy listening to sounds. So for those kind of remote places, I'm kind of have like a little wanderlust or adventure kind of mindset. Just kind of want to see what's around the next bend. And I find these places that a lot of people may be hunting, but they may be hunting from a different angle. And I try to find that angle that the average person's not thinking of. So that's what you have to do, is really think outside the box. And you have to remember to always keep the wind in your face while you're doing that. And that's the big thing, is think outside the box, but you still have to have the wind in your face when you're approaching your stand. But still, the bucks have to have the wind to their advantage. So I'm sure you've talked about that on this podcast a million times. But so it was an interesting setup there where I kind of hunt a crosswind. Basically, I use the river as a natural barrier. So the wind is blowing at a crosswind from my left to right, but it's blowing over back behind me over the river, and the bucks are generally walking that river edge with the wind in their face, but they can't smell me because I'm close enough to the river to where they're not behind me or downwind. They can't get downwind. That's a foolproof setup. It's just trying to find that place that gets you there.
Yeah, you shared a lot right there. Now, how did you figure out the strategy? How did it all come together?
The first thing came together, I was about 16 or probably 18 to 20. I had this place back in New York, and I started killing some nice 2.5-year-old bucks. And that was a big accomplishment. Even my adult peers and local people weren't killing 110, 125 inch deer like I was every year. And basically was getting deer on trail camera, but not seeing them. So I was constantly trying to figure out, how is this deer getting to this trail camera right in front of my tree stand, and I'm not seeing them. I call it hunting a crosswind. And so, like, for example, let's say you're in a corner of a field, which I hunt a lot of times, especially in the morning. And the way I would hunt it in the morning is different than I would hunt it in the evening. I would actually have my wind blowing out into the field in the morning, facing in the woods. I may be in the woods 20, 30, 40, 50 yards, depending on the terrain and the vegetation cover and the trails and the sign. And I've got my wind blowing at an angle from the direction the deer are coming from. Now, granted, yes, if they went out into the field and walked back in there or several yards behind me, they would wind me. But my scent cone is angling back to my left, we'll say, from my right to my left shoulder. And the deer are coming at me from like 9 or 10 o'clock position. I'm facing into the timber, and that's noon. The wind's blowing back about 7 or 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and they're coming from the 9, 10, 11 o'clock area. And that seems to be pretty foolproof.
So that's in the morning. How about in the afternoon?
The afternoon's different. I've noticed in my experiences that the wind has to be, in most cases, I've found to be blowing towards the woods a little bit. Like, let's say you have a square chunk of timber, and on one end, there's a hedgerow that comes out. I may move up or down that hedgerow so that I can have my wind blowing back into the timber, but it's skirting their travel path, and it's not in line with their travel path. So it's hard to maybe explain over the phone. Having a map available would be much easier, but I've just noticed, again, I've had big bucks on camera and stuff like that, and I've hunted the wind blowing into the field and different things like that. And I just noticed that the wind cannot, in my experiences, be blowing out from the woods to the field, because you're obviously set up on the edge of the woods, and it's tough for them to get out in front of you and get several deer in front of you to make the shot, or have deer get in front of you and not wind you. So it's hard to maybe explain, but it's situational, I guess, as far as that goes.
Maybe we need to do a webinar coming up on Deer Hunting Institute coming up. Hey, if somebody wants to get hold of you and said, hey, Tim, I like what you said, or I got some comments I wanted to share my miss with you, how would they do that?
Easy to find on Facebook, Tim Cool, Cool. Prodigy Outdoors is my hunting videos, and then Prodigy Outdoors Hemp, which is my CBD products that I just came out with and I'm very excited about. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Well, any of those 3 channels on Facebook or Instagram, I'm pretty easy to find. And I always answer. I love talking to people. I've got several people that I may never meet that live across the country, and I look forward to talking about getting hunting spots because Facebook is a powerful tool for that. But I do enjoy it a lot. So I'm easy to get a hold of. I love to talk to people.
Thanks for that, Tim. One more thing before we move into the second phase of today's episode on Whitetail Rendezvous. When do you start planning your hunts?
Out of state or in state?
Doesn't matter.
Out of state, I try to plan them in the winter time, and you want to start planning them. When I think out of state, I think maybe mule deer, early season whitetail. And if it's mule deer and elk and antelope, you're going to want to start planning in December and January because that's when these states start opening up their draw processes and stuff like that. And I also want to say that just because you want to go antelope or mule deer hunting may not mean that you necessarily should go the year that you come up with that idea, and maybe do a little more research and buy yourself a little time by planning for the next year, because you never know what information you may come across or what people you may meet that can direct you a little farther. So I've kind of gone on a whim before type of trips, and I've had good success, but like I really want to go on a Coues deer hunt, but information and stuff like that, I don't have a solid basis to go all the way to Arizona and drive a full day's drive and stuff like that. So the sooner the better. Whitetail deer hunts, you can start probably planning since most are over the counter. When I think whitetail deer out of state, I usually think early September, and then obviously rut. I start early season, maybe around now, May, June. It's a pretty quick, easy process to find a piece of public and scout aerially. But there's certain things you want to key in on, especially going early season. And primary thing is food. And if you're heading out west, or you want to look for that green vegetation, alfalfa, early successional stuff, because I've gone to Nebraska and thought that we would have a good hunt, but I didn't go far enough west. I didn't get the alfalfa fields with the pivots and thin timber where it's really huntable. I went to southeastern Nebraska, which we'll probably talk about even more because that's been a great blessing from some people I've met out there. But I was basically hunting solid corn and tree lines, and my friend Cody and I went out there and we barely saw deer because there was really nowhere to see them. Beans were brown. They weren't eating the beans, and the maze of corn in the Cornhusker state, just like it's coined. So another big thing is to make sure that where you're going is going to have what you need to be successful. And early season, that's going to be the green crops, the alfalfa and the kind of the CRP and some water and stuff like that. And we had the water, we had the public land. There was no reason for them to leave the corn, and there wasn't really anywhere to really see them either. And the October, most guys go out. That should be easy planning. And if you are going out to do that type of hunting, just stick to the simple. If you're hunting public land, or a lot of guys go on guided hunts and stuff, just stick to the basics, the ridges, pinch points, the inside corners, and just buy your time, because a lot of spots are just as good as any. And I'm guilty of trying to find that kind of unicorn needle in a haystack spot where I may have been better off just parking it for a while and letting things play out.
One thing I'll add, and then we'll close up this section, is that you go to a place you never hunted before, spend a day, spend hours, long distance scouting, get up on a ridge, get up on high point, get someplace you can see, and then get your glass out and just watch morning and night, at least one morning and one night, to see it's that specific pivot, that alfalfa, beans, corn, whatever's growing there, if they're even coming out to there. Because if they're not coming out to there, go find some place there are deer. I mean, a lot of people make that mistake. They go, oh, this looks good, and there's no fresh sign, and they waste 3 days of their hunt and said, oh, we should have been over here. Well, go find a deer from a long distance first, just like elk. The best elk hunters I know leave camp really early in the morning, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, hike for a couple hours. The sunrise is coming up and hitting the basins. They can see if there's any elk in that basin.
Yeah.
If there's elk, they'll be there. And they'll just see them, and then they'll say, game on. If they're not in that basin, then they've got to
somewhere.
They just repeat the process. So they'll go, hey, they're not hitting in the morning. That means they're not going to come out at night. Then I'm going to go over and find a different basin. There's more in this hunting thing than just, I'm going to call a bull in and figure it out, or I'm going to waylay a buck coming out to a field. So with that, Tim Kuhl, thank you so much for joining us on this segment of Whitetail Rendezvous. And we're going to end this, and we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with the 10 questions on how to find a place to hunt.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.